At the end of World War II, the Allies found much more than ruins and documents. They discovered the most valuable and symbolic objects of the SS, charged with ideology and ritual. Among them were the Totenkopf rings, issued by Himmler, ceremonial daggers inscribed with loyalty, and tailor-made uniforms for the most loyal officers. One of the most notable finds was Heinrich Himmler's personal helmet, currently considered the most expensive in the world on the military collector's market, auctioned for over 250,000 euros. But this was not an isolated case. Items have also come to light, such as the original uniform of SS Sturmbannführer Otto Kumm, which was auctioned after being hidden in private collections for years. Its perfectly preserved insignia reflect the extreme care the SS placed on its image and hierarchy. Furthermore, Himmler's personal vehicles, such as his armored Mercedes-Benz, have been located, restored, and in some cases displayed in museums under tight security. These objects, beyond their historical value, continue to spark fascination, controversy, and debate about the ethical use of the past. The death masks, the facial copies of Himmler's face that make the world uncomfortable. Heinrich Himmler is a name that even decades after his death remains synonymous with horror, systematic violence, and genocide. Born in Munich on October 7, 1900, Himmler was raised in a middle-class Catholic family. His father was an authoritarian and devout schoolteacher, and from a young age, Heinrich developed a disciplined, structured personality, but also one obsessed with order and purity, concepts that would later become pillars of his fanatical ideology. In his younger years, Himmler witnessed the collapse of the German Empire after World War I. The defeat, the harsh conditions of the Treaty of Versailles, and the political chaos of the Weimar Republic contributed to the growing radicalism among young German nationalists. Himmler studied agronomy in Munich, but soon became fascinated by the nascent National Socialist movement. In 1923, he participated as a spectator in the failed coup d'état known as the Munich Putsch, led by Adolf Hitler. It was during these years that he began his rise within the National Socialist Party until in 1925 he joined the Schutzstaffel, better known as the SS, a paramilitary organization destined to become an independent and feared power structure. With his meticulous leadership, Himmler transformed the SS into an elitist order, steeped in Germanic mysticism and pseudo-scientific racism. Under his command, the SS not only became the enforcer of internal repression, but also the cornerstone of an ideology of extermination. In 1934, following the Night of the Long Knives, in which Hitler purged his rivals within the party, Himmler established himself as one of the most powerful men in the Third Reich. From then on, he would lead a bureaucratic and murderous machine that would spread throughout Europe. As Reichsführer of the SS, Himmler assumed police, military, and racial responsibilities. He founded the Gestapo, the feared secret police, and established a vast system of concentration camps. His obsession with racial purity translated into programs such as Lebensborn to promote the birth of Aryan children, and the planning of the final solution, the systematic extermination of the Jewish people. Although Hitler was the face of Nazism, it was Himmler who executed its most monstrous policies with meticulous efficiency. The scale of his power was so great that he even had authority over the Waffen-SS, his organization's combat troops, which operated parallel to the Wehrmacht. He also arranged for the deportation and murder of millions: Jews, Roma, homosexuals, the disabled, and political dissidents. Himmler regularly visited the concentration camps and, in some cases, witnessed executions in person, though he always maintained the facade of an orderly, almost bourgeois civil servant, convinced he was performing a patriotic duty. Despite his image as a loyal servant in the final months of the war, Himmler attempted to distance himself from Hitler and seek a negotiated solution with the Allies. In April 1945, as Berlin was surrounded and the regime was collapsing, Himmler contacted Swedish intermediaries to offer a conditional surrender to the British and Americans, bypassing the Soviets. He did this without Hitler's knowledge, who, upon learning of this, accused him of being a traitor and expelled him from all his posts. From one of the most powerful men in the Reich, Himmler went from being a fugitive in a matter of days. He shaved off his mustache, used false documents under the name Heinrich Himmler, and wandered around northern Germany with a small group of loyal followers. The architect of terror, who had controlled the lives and deaths of millions, was now a pariah without a country or power, trapped by the same fate he had imposed on others. Stripped of his titles by direct order of Hitler after his secret negotiations with the Allies became known, Himmler was no longer the all-powerful Reichsführer, SS. He was now simply a fugitive. Accompanied by two loyal officers, Werner Grottmann and Heinz Macher, he crossed northern Germany disguised as a private, with forged papers in the name Heinrich Himmler. He had exchanged his uniform for ordinary clothes, shaved off his distinctive moustache, and avoided any contact that might reveal his identity. For weeks, the small group wandered back roads, slept in abandoned sheds, and ate whatever they could find. Himmler hoped to find a way to surrender to the British, convinced that they might recognize his strategic value and negotiate a favorable surrender. That hope, however, was completely disconnected from reality. His name was synonymous with genocide, and his face was one of the most wanted on the planet. Finally, on May 21, 1945, Himmler and his companions were intercepted by a British patrol near the village of Bremerwörde. They were taken to a makeshift prison camp at Westertimke. During interrogation, Himmler's false documentation aroused suspicion. A British officer, Captain Sylvester, noticed his nervous behavior and ordered a more thorough examination. The next day, Himmler was taken to British headquarters in Lüneburg for an identity check. There, he was recognized by one of the intelligence officers. His face was unmistakable. The bishops of Nazism were widely known to the Allies. The charade was over. The executioner of Europe was finally in the hands of the enemy. But the justice that was meant to come never did. During the medical examination preceding the official interrogation, Himmler asked to go to the bathroom. The British Army doctor, unsuspecting, complied. Just seconds later, Himmler collapsed to the floor, convulsing. The doctor attempted to revive him and perform an emergency stomach pump, but it was too late. Within minutes, Heinrich Himmler was dead. Thus, the man who had masterminded the deaths of millions took his own life to escape his own surrender. The news of his death was greeted with a mixture of disbelief and relief. For many in Allied circles, there was frustration. They would not be able to publicly judge the Reichsführer, SS. They would not be able to show the world the face of one of the chief architects of the Holocaust sitting before a tribunal, facing the evidence of his crimes. However, they also avoided the risk of him becoming a martyr for the remnants of National Socialism. Himmler's body was subjected to a forensic examination. The British authorities, aware of the symbolic value of this figure, needed irrefutable proof of his identity and death. Photographs of the corpse were taken and detailed medical records were kept. His face was documented from various angles, his teeth and fingerprints were examined, and old medical records were consulted. There was no doubt. The dead man was Heinrich Himmler. In a final act of control, the British decided to dispose of his body unceremoniously. He was buried secretly in an undisclosed location, presumably near Lüneburg. No cross, gravestone, or marker was placed there, nothing that could become a pilgrimage site for future Nazi sympathizers. However, before the burial, British officials decided to take an unusual action, motivated by both scientific and judicial reasons: the creation of facial molds of Himmler's corpse. Those molds, later known as the death masks, would become a cult object, riddled with mystery and sought after by hundreds of collectors around the world. On May 23, 1945, Heinrich Himmler, the architect of Nazi terror, lay lifeless on a makeshift stretcher in British custody. His face, still recognizable despite the convulsions of poisoning, displayed the rigidity typical of recent death. And yet, for British intelligence and forensic officers, the corpse wasn't simply a body, it was evidence. Proof that one of the most wanted criminals of the 20th century was dead, evidence that needed to be meticulously documented before he disappeared forever. It was then that it was decided, on the orders of the British authorities, to carry out an unusual but historically significant practice: to make a death mask. Death masks, facial molds taken post-mortem, have been used for centuries to preserve the features of notable figures. Napoleon, Beethoven, Dante, and Blaise Pascal were all immortalized in plaster after their deaths. In Himmler's case, however, it was not a question of preserving the legacy of a famous man, but rather of capturing the face of a criminal, a symbol of horror as forensic evidence and an object of historical study. Therefore, a British team, composed of military doctors, forensic technicians and photographers, proceeded with the mold making just hours after death. Moldable materials were applied to Himmler's face, carefully covering the facial lines, eyelids, mouth and jaw. It was delicate work, as every anatomical detail had to be captured without damaging the integrity of the corpse. Once hardened, the mold was precisely removed, and plaster or a mixture of similar compounds was poured to create three-dimensional copies of the face. At least 2 copies of the mold were successfully made. These masks would depict, with disturbing fidelity, Himmler's face in his final hours. The sunken cheekbones, the cadaverous rigidity of his lips, the final stillness of his eyelids. One of the most disturbing aspects of these reproductions is the absence of expression. Unlike photographs, a death mask reveals absolute neutrality, the face stripped of life, devoid of emotion, transformed into an object. For decades, little was known about the fate of these molds. Some reports indicated that one of the masks was sent to British headquarters for preservation as forensic evidence. Another copy, according to some accounts, was transferred to a secret archive for anthropological or criminological study. The truth is that at least one of them was preserved and today forms part of the Imperial War Museum collection. Museum in London, although it is not regularly on public display. The initial objective was neither exhibition nor ridicule. The creation of the mask responded to a scientific and judicial logic, to document the end of a key figure of Nazism, to ensure that it was not a double, and to have a 3-dimensional facial reference for future comparisons or studies. In times without DNA testing, facial records were crucial for confirming identities. The existence of the mask generated controversy among historians and curators. Many debated whether the artifact should be displayed as a warning, as a symbol of the collapse of totalitarianism, or whether it should be kept confidential as an archival object to avoid fueling morbid curiosity or a macabre cult. Unlike the Nuremberg trials, where criminals were displayed before the world, Himmler managed to escape that fate. His death mask thus became his only visual condemnation. Over the years, its documentary value has grown. The mask is one of the few physical testimonies of the end of a man who destroyed millions of lives. Some scholars have used it in studies of criminal physiognomy, although these approaches have been widely questioned for their ideological implications. Others analyze it from a historical and symbolic perspective as the last vestige of a face that embodied the bureaucratized evil of the 20th century. Ethical debates have also arisen, such as whether it is right to preserve and reproduce the image of a genocidal criminal and what message its silent preservation in a museum sends to the world and to the victims. In some far-right circles, Himmler is still venerated as a martyr of National Socialism, so the mask's exhibition could be exploited for propaganda purposes. For this reason, access to it is strictly controlled and its reproduction prohibited. The second mask, whose whereabouts are unknown, has been the subject of dozens of conspiracy theories. Some historians suggest that the mask was destroyed after its creation because, due to some strange event, it displayed a horrific grimace of pain, which was scientifically impossible given that it was a corpse. Of course, since there is no record of it, it is impossible to verify these claims. According to other accounts, the death mask was sent to an external forensic department, which was supposed to perform a facial analysis but was lost in the process. To this day, many speculate that it could have been stolen by the transport or laboratory staff and ended up in the hands of unknown collectors, people who admire Nazi leaders, or even Masonic lodges, which often acquire these artifacts on the black market for thousands of dollars, later using them as ritual objects. In the end, Himmler's death masks are not just forensic artifacts, but a trace of history. A petrified echo of the face that signed extermination orders, that designed concentration camps, that plotted the routes of genocide with the calm of a civil servant. His mask shows neither regret nor glory, only silence. Thus, one remains in an archive basement, hidden from public view with the motionless face of Heinrich Himmler. A face that doesn't smile, doesn't cry out, doesn't respond, and which, perhaps in that eternal rigidity, holds the weight of millions of voices that had neither face nor grave. The most expensive helmet in the world has been found. Why is it so valuable? During World War I, high rates of head injuries led the Imperial German Army to replace the traditional leather Pickelhaube with a more effective steel helmet. The result was the Stahlhelm M 1916, designed by Dr. Friedrich Schwerd of the Hanover Technical Institute. Inspired by the medieval helmet, it offered superior head and neck protection. Its introduction at the Battle of Verdun in 1916 marked a significant decrease in head injuries among German troops. With the rise of the Third Reich, the Stahlhelm was redesigned to suit modern needs. In 1935, the M35 model was introduced, made of chromium nickel steel with a more rounded shape and without the prominent ear flaps of the previous model. Later, the M40 and M42 models incorporated changes to facilitate mass production, such as the elimination of certain rivets and a simplification of the design. These helmets were produced in various sizes, with weights ranging from 810 to 1,230 grams, depending on the size. The M35 featured rivets in the vents, while on the M40 these were replaced with embossed patterns to reduce costs and improve safety. The M42 eliminated the rolled brim, leaving the edge unfolded, which further simplified production. The Stahlhelm offered superior protection against fragments and shrapnel compared to other helmets of the time. However, it had certain drawbacks. The vents could allow cold air to enter in winter, and its design often made hearing difficult, which, among other problems, created echoes when speaking. Furthermore, the helmet's weight could be uncomfortable for long periods of wear. Despite these flaws, the Stahlhelm became a symbol of the German soldier, representing the discipline and power of the Third Reich's army. The Schutzstaffel, under the leadership of Heinrich Himmler, adopted the Stahlhelm as an integral part of their uniform, but with distinctive modifications. In the early years, the SS reused World War I-era M16 helmets, repainted black and adorned with specific insignia, such as the SS runes and the Totenkopf, or skull and crossbones, symbols that evoked both Germanic mysticism and an image of death and power. These insignia not only served to identify units, but also reinforced the ideology of the SS as an elitist and feared order. The Totenkopf, in particular, had roots in Prussian military units and was reinterpreted by the SS to symbolize its connection to a supposed ancient warrior heritage. However, after the war, some apocryphal historians coined the term Himmler helmets, which has been used to describe certain helmets directly associated with Heinrich Himmler or SS units under his command. However, there is no conclusive evidence that Himmler ever had a customized helmet model. However, war history buffs continue to use this term to refer to standard SS helmets that, due to their association with Himmler and elite units, acquired a special aura or were simply adorned with symbols related to the Schutzstaffel. Fake replicas have also become popular online, depicting helmets with apocryphal insignia, crosses, or metal decorations that were not actually used at the time. The original helmets, often M35 or M40 models, could feature distinctive SS features such as decals of runes and a skull, and were used by units such as the Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler and the SS Totenkopfverbände, responsible for the administration of the concentration camps. After World War II, many German helmets were reused by other countries or passed into the hands of collectors. SS helmets, due to their rarity and historical connotations, became highly valued items on the military antiques market. However, their display and sale are regulated in several countries due to laws prohibiting the promotion of Nazi symbols. In fact, one of these helmets is believed to be the most expensive in the world, and it belongs to none other than the one that belonged to Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler himself. Following Himmler's capture, American forces entered his villa, a large mansion on the shores of Lake Tegernsee, which had been converted into a small headquarters with walls and a roof reinforced to withstand bombing. When the Allies entered the Reichsführer's house, they did not find his family, who had already fled, but the place was littered with the Nazi leader's personal belongings as well as other valuables, including artwork, weapons, gold, and extremely expensive drinks. The vast majority of Himmler's personal belongings were destroyed, although some soldiers managed to recover medals, handguns, photographs, badges, and other memorabilia, most of which would be seized by the authorities or sold illegally after the war. One such case was that of Corporal Raymond W. Dykard, a young American who participated in the raids and returned to the United States with a very special souvenir, one of the famous black SS helmets. But this one was quite different from all the other captured models. The name of Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler himself was engraved inside. indicating that it was his personal helmet, the one he had worn from the beginning of the war until 1940. After Dykard's death, his son donated the helmet to the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York, where it remains on display to this day. While it has never been auctioned, so there is no specific selling price attached to this curious object, it is considered to be the most expensive helmet in the world. This is because a similar helmet, which belonged to a much lower-ranking SS officer, sold for $6,500 at auction in New York in 2022. Already an impressive price for a helmet, it is a mere fraction of what Himmler's helmet could fetch, which is estimated to be worth 10 times that amount, surpassing even collectible helmets from the Middle Ages. However, the Holocaust Museum has no plans to sell it and probably never will. Today, these helmets are studied not only as military artifacts, but also as symbols of an ideology that wreaked havoc in Europe. Their analysis provides insight into how design and symbolism were used to instill fear and consolidate power during the Nazi regime. The skull rings, the sinister symbol with which Himmler sought to create his own lodge. The SS Ring of Honor, better known as the Skull Ring, was a decoration of the Schutzstaffel. However, it was not an official state recognition, but a personal gift given by Heinrich Himmler himself to distinguished members of the SS. It became a highly coveted and unsaleable decoration, and even during the Nazi era, counterfeit replicas were manufactured. The skull ring was initially issued to senior officers of the SS Old Guard, of whom there were fewer than 5,000. It was later extended to all SS members who graduated from the Junkers schools and other SS training centers. Each ring was engraved on the inside with the recipient's name, the date of award, and Himmler's signature. The ring included a standard letter from Himmler with a generalized message, but clarifying that it was to be worn only on the left hand, on the ring finger. In the letter, according to Himmler, the ring was a reminder at all times to be ready to risk our lives for the lives of all. As the SS expanded, many failed to obtain the ring, so some SS and police members commissioned local jewelers to make unofficial versions. If a member of the SS was dismissed or retired from service, his ring was to be returned. In 1938, Himmler ordered the return of all rings of deceased SS men and officers to be kept in a chest at Wewelsburg Castle. This was to be a memorial symbolizing the deceased's continued membership in the SS order. The ring's symbolism reflected Himmler's interest in Germanic mysticism and includes the Totenkopf symbol related to the death cult and the Armanen runes related to Germanic paganism. The ring was designed by Karl Maria Willigut, an Austrian occultist, with manufacturing in charge of the Otto and Carolina family jewelry store Gar of Munich. A sig rune to the left and right of the skull, framed by a triangle, represents the power of the sun and conquering energy. A Hagal rune represents the faith and camaraderie idealized by the organization's leaders. The esoteric meaning of the Hagal rune, according to Guido, was, "Enclose the universe within yourself and you will control it." Other runes related to protection from evil and salvation, and the classic swastika completed the iconography engraved on the ring. Over the years, rings with other runes and various symbols have been found, but it is believed that these were either replicas made by local smiths at the request of officers who did not receive them from Himmler, or even replicas created in the post-war period. In October 1944, Himmler ordered the manufacture and awarding of the ring to stop and all remaining rings, approximately 11,500, to be sealed in a hill near Wewelsburg. By January 1945, 64% of the 14,500 rings manufactured had been returned to Himmler after the death of their wearers. In addition, 10% had been lost on the battlefield, and 26% were either in the hands of their wearers or their whereabouts were unknown. The SS leader's exact motives for making these decisions are unknown, but it is believed that the rings were part of his own lodge, which he wanted to impose behind Hitler's back and which he regretted in the face of the fall of the regime. Mercedes-Benz, the Nazi cars worth millions of dollars today. From the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, there was no doubt that German engineering held a position of leadership and dominance. While German manufacturing and industrial output could not match that of the United States, the fact that automobiles could be developed in Germany for the first time demonstrated a genuine capacity for imaginative engineering that would find real competition in only a few Western countries during the first half of the 20th century. The name Mercedes originated from one of the company's sales agents, Emil Jelinek, who at the turn of the century was dissatisfied with the short-wheelbase Daimler-powered cars. Jelinek, the Austro-Hungarian consul in Germany, had a penchant for speed. Working as a Daimler sales agent in Nice, France, Jelinek ordered a new model, promising to personally purchase the first 36 units provided his eldest teenage daughter's name appeared on the car. He even changed the family name to Jelinek Mercedes in 1903. The three-pointed star emblem, inspired by Gottlieb Daimler, symbolizes land, air, and sea transport. Ferdinand Porsche joined Benz and became chief engineer in 1923. Due to the severe economic crisis in Europe, the two companies merged in 1926 to become Daimler-Benz. Daimler-built cars were soon also called Mercedes-Benz, sometimes abbreviated as MBZ in automotive literature. Porsche created the supercharged Mercedes series, of which the SSKL Supersport Kurz Leicht became the epitome of performance. Its distinctive sound was attributed to the so-called elephant blower supercharger, which produced a powerful roar by almost doubling the power. In 1929, Dr. Hans Niebel took over as chief engineer and developed the Mercedes-Benz 500K and 540K, which became legendary for their performance and aesthetics. Hermann Ahrens was the in-house body designer at Sindelfinger, where the MBZ V12DB 600 engines were later built for Luftwaffe aircraft such as the Messerschmitt Me 109. These cars became flagship cars of the SS, and several customized versions were used by senior officers. Hitler had reason to be proud of his country's finest automobile. In 1939, when Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed a non-aggression pact, Hitler gave a supercharged Mercedes-Benz Roadster with a rear seat to Joseph Stalin. After Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, breaking the non-aggression pact, Stalin refused to use the car and gave it to one of his generals. Hitler used a total of 5 open-top 770K saloon cars for his entourage in Germany. However, the Führer himself travelled in a fairly well-protected, hard-topped car. The fact that Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo in 1914 while travelling in an open-top car may have influenced Hitler to always use closed Mercedes-Benz sedans unless he was showing off in a parade. This precaution was confirmed after the assassination of General Reinhard Heydrich in Prague in 1942 in an open-top car, after which Hitler placed an order for 20 MBZ 540K armoured sedans. Hitler had already opted for heavily armoured limousines and had previously ordered 2 more 770K models. The 770K model was known as the Grosser Mercedes Offener touring car, with its 7,655 cubic centimetre straight-8 engine, single overhead camshaft and twin carburetors. Generating 230 horsepower when the supercharger was activated, the vehicle could reach 193 kilometers per hour, 120 miles per hour, despite weighing 4,500 kilograms, 10,800 pounds. Its enormous weight was due in part to the additional 6mm armour on the floor and 3mm on the doors, as well as 40mm thick bulletproof glass. There were 3 folding seats behind the driver's seat, allowing the car to seat a total of 9 people. Fully upholstered in leather, it had a 5-inch raised floor on the right side to make Hitler appear taller when standing. The front seat folded back to give him more room while standing. The car had a 51-gallon gas tank and a range of 150 miles, but could achieve 3 miles per gallon in the city. The car also featured 4-wheel independent leaf spring suspension, dual-system power brakes, and 8.25 by 17-inch tires. Hitler ordered another fully enclosed Mercedes 770K in 1943, fitted with an armour-reinforced steel roof in addition to the rest of the armour and amenities of his earlier cars. Hitler wanted to convey to the world the superiority of German engineering. At that time, Germany was lagging behind in motorization. Hitler promised the German people that he would rapidly develop the automotive industry and initiated a program of rapid construction of the Autobahn network, the first of which opened in May 1935. With government support, Mercedes-Benz doubled its production from 6,000 cars in 1932 to 12,000 in 1934. By 1935, that figure had more than doubled, reaching 25,000. While the exact number of 770,000 armored vehicles manufactured by the German company is unknown, it is known that other high-ranking Nazis, such as Himmler and Goering, had their own models at their disposal. Himmler's Grand Mercedes, the armored limousine used by the head of the SS. Between 1930 and 1943, Mercedes-Benz produced the 770 model, known as the Grand Mercedes, a luxury limousine intended for heads of state, monarchs, and high-ranking officials. Its imposing design and advanced technology made it a symbol of power and prestige. The first series, called the W07, was introduced in 1930 and featured a 7.7-litre straight-eight engine capable of producing 150 horsepower without supercharging and up to 200 with a Roots-type supercharger. This model reached speeds of up to 160 km per hour, 99 miles per hour. The second series, the W150, launched in 1938, featured improvements to the chassis, suspension and armour, adapting to the growing security needs of the time. These limousines were used by figures such as Adolf Hitler, Hermann Goering and Heinrich Himmler, as well as foreign leaders allied with the Third Reich. The Mercedes-Benz 770K was noted for its advanced engineering and exceptional safety measures for its time. The W150 model featured a 7.7-litre supercharged straight-eight engine, producing approximately 230 horsepower. Despite its weight, which could exceed 4.5 tons due to its armor plating, it reached speeds of up to 170 km per hour, 106 miles per hour, although it was recommended to limit speeds to 80 km per hour, 50 miles per hour to preserve the tires. The armor included 18 mm thick steel in the body, bulletproof glass up to 40 mm thick, and a reinforced floor to resist mines. It also featured a retractable steel panel behind the rear seat to protect occupants from attacks from behind. The heating system directed warm air through ducts toward the windshield to prevent fogging. One of the most notable examples of the 770K was assigned to Heinrich Himmler, chief of the SS. This vehicle, delivered in 1943 to the Reich Chancellery, featured all the armor features mentioned above. It also incorporated a central locking system and additional security measures. The car was used by Himmler on various official duties and remained in service until the end of the war. At the end of the conflict, it was abandoned in Obersalzberg and later recovered by the Allied forces. After the fall of the Third Reich, many of the Mercedes-Benz 770Ks used by high-ranking officials were captured by the Allied forces. Some were used by the victorious armies, while others passed into the hands of private collectors or museums. Himmler's vehicle was recovered and preserved, and is on display at the Sinsheim Museum as part of a collection of vintage or historically significant cars. It is a historical piece that offers a tangible glimpse into the power and opulence of the Nazi regime. Its preservation allows for study and reflection on a dark period in history, reminding us of the importance of memory and education to prevent the repetition of such events. The most expensive car of Nazism, the eccentric blue goose of the leader of the Luftwaffe. In 1936, Mercedes-Benz introduced the special 540K model dubbed the 540Ks, a luxurious grand touring car based on a chassis with a shorter 2,980mm wheelbase and a carefully crafted body, designed primarily for use by the National Socialist Party leadership. Its rather high price, at 28,000 German marks, was due to its excellent craftsmanship as well as its scarcity, with only 32 units of this luxurious car being built. In 1937, Reichsmarshal Hermann Goering ordered a 540Ks in his favorite color, a sober shade of cobalt known as Luftwaffe Blue, the color of the German Air Force. Most 540,000 of the era were black, green or red, so Goering's striking car immediately earned a nickname, the Blue Goose, as it was very elegant and had a very elongated hood like the animal's neck. Goering was often photographed in the car, which bore his family crest painted on the doors and gold plaques on various parts, such as the glove compartment. Some claim that Goering did not pay for the Blue Goose himself, but that the car was a gift from Hitler, according to a gold plaque affixed to the glove compartment door. The car featured all the modern conveniences of the era, including bulletproof glass, armored sides, and a reinforced body. It was said to be able to withstand a bomb blast. However, there was an unexpected problem upon delivery. Goering couldn't fit in the car. The Reich Marshal had developed a severe morphine addiction and was morbidly obese, so the 540 Ks had to be returned to Mercedes, and the company redesigned the seats, removing some of the padding to allow the burly Reich Marshal to sit behind the wheel. Despite all his decorations, Goering did not devote most of his time to establishing a successful strategy for winning the air war against Britain. Instead, he spent most of his time confiscating stolen artwork and other valuables, as well as indulging in a morphine habit, which earned him the persistent revulsion of his subordinates, who called him Fat Bastard. However, despite his lack of artifacts, artwork, and other luxurious indulgences of all his possessions, the Mercedes 540K was his favorite, and numerous photographs of him with it exist. As the war began to wind down, soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division, the Army's 3rd Infantry Division, and the French Army's 2nd Division discussed finding the famous Blue Goose as a war prize, even though they knew that formal rules dictated that a private could never seize such significant war loot as a luxury car that cost over $20,000 at the time. Still, just finding it was prize enough for the soldiers, as the beautiful car was an icon of powerful German industry. Once the Allies arrived at the Nazi playground at Berchtesgaden near the Austrian border, the soldiers discovered that the massive complex where Hitler, Goering, Secretary Martin Bormann, and other leading Nazis had private mansions had been extensively bombed by the British just days earlier. So, instead of searching for the Blue Goose in bombed-out garages, the soldiers proceeded to loot the wine cellars and liquor cabinets of Hitler's Berghof and those of other Nazi leaders. After all, this war booty was theirs to enjoy for themselves and wouldn't be confiscated by their superiors. The Allies, most of whom had survived the carnage of the Battle of the Bulge, got drunk off their asses, and some later estimates claim they drank around $1 million in one weekend. On one of their alcohol-fueled excursions, the soldiers randomly stumbled upon a building that hadn't been completely demolished and discovered a garage containing the legendary Blue Goose. One of the soldiers drunkenly shot out the car's windshield, thinking he might deactivate an invisible booby trap, but nothing exploded. The soldiers were right. None of them ended up acquiring the luxury car, but once confiscated, it was used as a staff vehicle. Major General Maxwell Taylor used it as a command vehicle in West Germany until it was taken into service by the U.S. Treasury, after which it was shipped to North America upon arriving in Washington, D.C. It went on a victory tour, where it was displayed as war booty across the country. Then, in 1956, it was auctioned by the U.S. Army at the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland and sold to Jacques Tunick of Greenwich, Connecticut, who paid $2,167 for it at the time. Truly a bargain, considering that the car cost 6 or 7 times as much in Germany. In 1958, Tunick sold the car to the private collection of veterinarian Dr. George Bitgood, Jr., who decided to paint it black and restore the chrome on the visible metal parts. Bitgood decided to keep the Blue Goose private and only exhibited it once at the Durham, Connecticut County Fair in 1973. After the veterinarian's death, his heirs received the car, which was displayed in June 2002 at the 101st Air Force reunion at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. The Bitgood family subsequently sold the car to Carnlove International Limited of Guernsey, its current owners, with the agreement that it be restored to its original condition, as found in Berchtesgaden and painted in the iconic Luftwaffe blue that had given rise to the Blue Goose legend. Horror collections, SS ceremonial weapons worth thousands of dollars on the black market. In addition to the mysterious skull rings, SS officers also received expensive swords and daggers as official recognition of their exploits or line of duty. The SS Honor Sword was a straight dress sword worn with the SS uniform between 1935 and 1945. First introduced in 1935, the SS sword was designed by Karl Diebitsch, Heinrich Himmler's personal advisor on art and design within the SS. The weapon had a long, slender, straight blade manufactured in varying lengths to suit the wielder's height. The hilt of the dagger featured a D-shaped knuckle bow and a black, grooved wooden grip. The grip was bound with silver wire and featured an inset disc bearing the SS runes in a straight lightning bolt pattern. The scabbard was painted with black enamel and featured decorative silver mounts on the top and bottom. It was usually used with a braided aluminum knot adorned with the SS runes in black on the handle. The officer's sword was officially awarded with a certificate hand-signed by Himmler to select SS officers in recognition of special merits. It was also awarded to officers graduating from SS officer training centers. The non-commissioned officer version was similar to the officer version, but lacked the silver decorations, reflecting their lower rank. There was also a special version with a blade made of Damascus metal, an exquisite alloy famous for its grained surface and extreme durability. These swords were extremely rare, as Himmler personally awarded them to a select few, usually high-ranking SS officers or important businessmen or statesmen holding an honorary rank of at least SS Oberfuhrer. Since they were usually presented to recipients on their 50th birthday, they were also known as birthday honor swords. However, the most common award was the SS dagger, introduced in December 1933, following similar traditions in the Reichswehr, Luftwaffe and Reichsmarine, and awarded to celebrate the final induction of SS men into specialist units each year. The daggers were presented at an awards ceremony held on the 9th of November each year, commemorating the official founding date of the SS. The Dagger of Honor was an official weapon of the SS dress uniform, used by all full members. The dagger's design was based on the 16th century Swiss dagger. The center of the broad, long, spear-pointed blade features a pronounced ridge, and the official SS motto, "My honor is loyalty," was engraved along the long axis of the blade. Both the guard and pommel were nickel-plated, and the hilt had black inlays, a silver Parteiadler eagle, and the SS symbol. The metal scabbard was lacquered in glossy black with a silver cap and mount. However, the dagger went through several versions during its production period. The first production, produced between 1933 and 1935, featured the manufacturer's logo, a black burnished ebony handle, and an engraved grip with Roman numerals 1 through 3. I stood for Munich, 2 for Dresden, and a 3 for Berlin. The second production run, produced between 1936 and 1938, featured the manufacturer's log with a double-labeled RZM code. The scabbard was burnished or painted black, and the Roman numerals on the guard were removed. The final production run, produced between 1938 and 1942, featured the RZM code, a black painted scabbard, and an inlaid eagle insignia on the handle, usually made of aluminum or a cheaper metal. In addition to these daggers, a variant existed for the old guard of the SS, that is, the founding officers or those who had joined the organization before Hitler's rise to power in 1933. This dagger was identical to the first-generation model, but the scabbard was fitted with a chain made of rectangular plates adorned with Totenkopf skulls and SS runes, and an additional silver ornament with a swastika motif. These daggers, like the skull rings bearing the same symbolism, were usually hand-presented by Heinrich Himmler himself. Some daggers have been found that include the carved inscription, "In Warm Comradeship, H. Himmler," demonstrating that the recipients were officers highly regarded by the SS leader. While the daggers were virtually identical to those issued to officers, the few that have been recovered show they were made from higher quality materials, and on the black market for Nazi artifacts, they are considered a valuable rarity. Production of the honor daggers, like most other awards, was discontinued in 1942, as resource shortages and wartime demands meant that all significant raw materials were used for the manufacture of weapons and munitions. Blood flag. Hitler's blood flag is the holy grail for Nazi collectors. After the failed Munich Putsch in November 1923, the Nazi Party was dismantled, its leader, Adolf Hitler, imprisoned and his cause seemingly defeated. Yet from the dust of that humiliation would emerge a carefully constructed narrative, a mythology that would transform the failed coup into a founding act. At the center of that legend, like a sacred object, stood a piece of cloth soaked in blood, the Blutfahne. The name itself, meaning blood flag, was not chosen at random. It was a powerful evocation. It suggested sacrifice, redemption, martyrdom. Like the sacred banners of the Crusades or the relics of medieval saints, the Blutfahne was elevated to a symbol of ideological purity and absolute dedication. It represented the blood of the martyrs of the movement, those 16 National Socialist Party militants who fell at Odeonsplatz on November 9, 1923. The original flag was a simple red banner with a black swastika on a white background in the center, a design that would later become the official symbol of the Third Reich. According to official party accounts, the banner was held during the march by Heinrich Trambauer, although Jakob Grimminger is also mentioned as its bearer or custodian in later years. During the shooting, the standard bearer is said to have fallen, and the flag was trampled and stained with the blood of the fallen. It is difficult to separate truth from myth. Some sources claim that the flag was barely spattered, others describe it as soaked in blood. But the truth is that the story was carefully cultivated by the Nazi propaganda machine. In his memoirs and speeches, Hitler alluded to it as a mystical symbol of National Socialist sacrifice. In Mein Kampf, although he does not mention the Blutfahne directly, he refers to the putsch as a heroic act to be remembered and venerated. The flag was recovered from the scene of the confrontation and hidden for months afterward, while Hitler faced trial and subsequent imprisonment in Landsberg prison. After his release in 1924 and while the party reorganized, the Blutfahne re-emerged as a central object of worship. It was carefully restored and kept as a relic, with a treatment that distanced it from the rest of the movement's flags. In 1926, during the Nazi Party Congress in Weimar, the first after the party's outlawing, the Blutfahne made its official appearance as a ceremonial object. Hitler presented it as a sacred banner of the movement, and from then on the flag was used for a specific ritual, the so-called Blutfahnenide, the oath of allegiance before the blood flag. This meant that every time a new party unit was created or a new banner was consecrated, it was ritually touched by the Blutfahne. This was a symbolic and ritual gesture. Contact with the blood of the martyrs conferred legitimacy, purity, and spiritual continuity on the new group. Jakob Grimminger, a member of the SS, was designated as its official and exclusive bearer. Dressed in a ceremonial uniform, Grimminger carried the flag at every party congress, marching slowly while those present saluted with raised arms. The flag was treated as a living relic like the mythical Ark of the Covenant. It was transported in a special case under military escort and was given almost religious honors. It never waved in the wind. It was not a symbol of combat, but of sacrifice. It was not used in war, but in political liturgy. The Nuremberg Congresses, the November 9th celebrations, and the Hitler Youth and SS oaths were all marked by their presence. The cult of the Blutfahne was part of the broader process of sacralization of Nazism. Hitler presented himself not only as a political leader, but as a messiah on a redemptive mission. And just as religions need relics, National Socialism needed symbols. The Blutfahne fulfilled that role. It was the shroud of the Führer, the sacred rag that connected the party to its blood roots, to the moment when the struggle was sealed with human lives. In the years that followed, the Blutfahne would witness the transformation of the NSDAP from a fringe group to a mass party, and from there to absolute power. Its presence legitimized every escalation, every act of loyalty, every oath of obedience. It was not simply a stained flag, it was an object that embodied myth. From 1926 until the final years of the Third Reich, the blood flag became one of the centerpieces of National Socialist ceremonial. It appeared every year on November 9th in Munich during the commemorations of the beer hall putsch, when Adolf Hitler and his entourage commemorated the failed March of 1923. But its function was not simply commemorative. The blood flag represented a symbolic transfer of power, faith, and ideological purity. Each new flag of the SA, SS, or Nazi party that was consecrated during party rallies was touched to the Blutfahne in a solemn ritual known as the Weihe der Fahnen, or the consecration of the banners. This ceremony imbued the organizations with a sacred character and spread the spirit of the martyrs to every corner of the party. During these ceremonies, Jakob Grimminger, its exclusive custodian, held it with white gloves and a solemn expression. Its bearer was forbidden to speak or look at anyone during the transfer of the flag. This ritual silence was part of the mystical aura that surrounded it. Upon seeing it, thousands of arms were raised in salute, while Hitler himself touched the new insignia with the original blood-stained cloth. Those seconds sealed oaths that linked party militants to a common and sacred history. Its last documented public appearance was during the 1938 National Socialist Party Congress, also known as the Greater Germany Rally, held in Nuremberg following the annexation of Austria. It was, unwittingly, its farewell to the political stage. With the outbreak of war in 1939, the congresses were cancelled and the Blutfahne was no longer displayed publicly. Hitler, now Führer and Supreme Commander, gradually abandoned mass party ceremonies. The sacred flag was then stored in an unknown location, and at this point in history the mystery of the Blutfahne begins. From 1939 onwards, the whereabouts of the Blutfahne became uncertain. Some reports suggest it was stored at the party headquarters in Munich, known as the Browns House, while others suggest that it was moved to a vault along with other party relics in anticipation of Allied bombing. The most widely accepted version holds that it was hidden in the Königsplatz underground, where the party kept objects considered irreplaceable. But when Allied troops entered Munich in April 1945, they did not find the Blutfahne. The party headquarters had been devastated by bombing and looted in the final days of the war. None of the American soldiers who searched the site reported finding the flag. Jakob Grimminger, captured shortly after, denied knowing its fate. Since the flag's disappearance, various theories about its possible whereabouts arose, which abound to this day. One of the most widespread theories holds that it was deliberately destroyed by the last Nazi leaders to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. There has been speculation that Martin Bormann, obsessed with eliminating any symbol that could be used in a trial or for propaganda, ordered its incineration in the final days of the regime. Let us remember that this was a widespread practice throughout Nazism, as we mentioned with Himmler's skull rings and other ritual awards and decorations. Another, more romantic theory claims that it was hidden by a party loyalist, hoping to preserve it for a future resurrection of the National Socialist movement. Of course, those who support this hypothesis encourage the search for the artifact as if it were a supernatural treasure, the holy grail of Nazism. There are also those who believe it was secretly captured by Allied soldiers and taken to the United States as war booty. Unconfirmed accounts speak of a blood-stained ceremonial cloth found in Munich and seen years later in private collections, but conclusive evidence has never been presented. US Army archives contain no reference to the Blutfahne among the seized objects. Of course, the black market was rife with supposedly original blood flags in various designs, with large and small stains, but none were ever confirmed to be genuine. It is also known that only one existed, so the appearance of copies only raised suspicions about all the examples offered to collectors. During the post-war denazification, the Allies destroyed tons of propaganda material, flags, uniforms, and documents linked to the Nazi Party and the SS. It's possible that, if it was found by mistake among the rubble, the flag was burned without anyone understanding its symbolic value. In any case, the Blutfahne's whereabouts remain a mystery. Unlike other symbols of the Third Reich, such as Hitler's desk or his armored car, the flag never reappeared in museums, private collections, or auctions. The blood flag, which had once been the symbolic heart of Nazism, vanished without a trace, like so many artifacts of totalitarian regimes that vanish with the collapse of power. Perhaps it smolders beneath the rubble of history. Perhaps it lies silent in some forgotten basement. Or perhaps it vanished because its time had passed, because the myth could no longer be sustained without the apparatus that had created it. Thus ended the symbol of a past stained literally in blood.